Hello, Bill. It's such an honor to have you as a guest on the High Performance Garden community. Thanks for agreeing to do this interview exploring the world of seeds.
It's my honor and pleasure.
Bill Mcdorman has 30 years of direct experience in the seed saving business. He and his wife, Belle Starr, co-created the Seed School and innovative seed saving education. So let's begin this interview. Why are seeds so important?
I think most people have, a pretty good answer when they say, wow, if you think about it, all our food comes from seeds. I mean, even the meat that we eat was fed these days mostly on grains, and those are seeds also. So almost everything we eat goes back to seeds, and so that's, the first level of why they're so important. But my answer goes a little deeper. They're so important because in order for us to survive, and I think this means as modern creatures, and I think this means as human beings as we look at the uncertainty of our future on the planet, seeds are the most powerful technology that we have to help us. They're the most adaptable and powerful, and we can talk about that later in the interview if you want. So that's my answer.
I would love to learn more about that. Just recently, I was flipping through the channels on the TV, and they had taken seeds, put them on a spaceship, sent them into outer space for 6 months, see if anything would happen to them, brought them back and planted them, and they grew. I was like, that's pretty good.
Yeah, that's good.
They were out in space.
Yeah, that's good technology.
We can do that.
Yeah, that's what we want. Yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. So let's start with how you got started in doing seeds.
Wow. I was trying to find my own seeds for my own garden when I was in college. I had bought a little house in Missoula, Montana, and I was going to attend the University of Montana, and it had a backyard I could use for a garden. And I grew up gardening with my parents in a really high, cold place in Idaho, but this was going to be my garden. For the first time in my life, it was my garden, and I could do whatever I wanted. And, of course, I wanted really great seeds because I wanted it to be a great garden, and I started trying to find what are the best seeds for my garden. And I found out it was a simple question, but a really difficult answer. I mean, what are the best seeds? How can you be really a responsible citizen? How can you support the right kinds of things through procuring your seeds? And which seeds will actually work the best right where you are? And what I uncovered was that the seeds that had been saved and adapted to my local ecosystem, Western Montana at the time, were probably the best ones, and they had all disappeared. At least that's what my neighbors were telling me. After World War II, even in burpees catalogs, they pointed out that you could buy, Uncle Vic, one of my neighbors showed me an old burpees catalog that had 9 different varieties of turnips in it. And one of them was good for the Mountain West. And they were still selling it. They had found it there and were reproducing and selling it. I showed him my new burpees catalog, and it only had 1 hybrid turnip in it for everybody in the United States. And that's, in a nutshell, the problem. We've monocropped and brought uniformity even to our garden seed market. Same seeds for everybody in the United States, and we've lost those varieties in many cases, or they're just not being passed around commercially anymore. Those things that were best adapted to right where we live, no matter where you live. And so that started me on an adventure to find them. And so we ended up finding enough varieties in Western Montana that we started a little seed company. It was a nonprofit called Garden City Seeds. And I'm really proud that it's still going. The nonprofit later sold the seed company, part of it, to a company called Irish Eyes, which is still operational in eastern Washington. But that was our attempt to find and make available again the seeds to things that really, lived and worked better in Western Montana.
That's amazing. And you've been at it for 30 years now.
36, actually. That was 1979.
Wow. That's great. So why is it important to save seeds?
There were rumors, and this is what I discovered as a student at the university when we were trying to find our seeds. There were predictions that we would lose 80% of the diversity that we had in our agriculture. So that's 8 out of 10 of every variety of something. That's the culturally adapted and ecologically adapted to every little niche throughout our whole country and the world, that we're going to lose 8 out of 10 of those varieties in the next 20 years. And so I'm unhappy to report that even in National Geographic, and I think it's the July issue in 2011, reported that when they counted them, they did the best count they could. We've lost 96% of those varieties.
Oh.
And this is, it goes back to, as I like to say, 7th grade biology. The strength of any ecosystem is its diversity. The more diversity you have, the more, options we have, as we have different climate changes and different diseases that inevitably attack any biological system, especially our agriculture. And so how we expect to survive when we throw away 96% of the varieties that took 10,000 years, to develop is a question. And so that's the importance. I think it's the most important thing, actually, that we face as we go forward. If we don't have a diverse foundation for our food system, wow, we limit our options in so many ways to build a new, resilient, and sustainable agriculture.
Yeah, that's pretty appalling. That's a huge number of loss. Can we ever get it back?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I've never been more optimistic because more and more people are getting involved. And that gets back to the technology in seeds. All you have to do is forget about something in your garden, like lettuce, let it go to seed, let those seeds fall naturally on the ground, and watch the lettuce that comes up in your garden, the volunteers, and we've all had that experience if you've gardened at all, the volunteers that come up, and almost every gardener will tell you those volunteers are better than the other things that they plant. And part of that reason is that they're now adapted to the growing system that you have, your particular one. They've self-selected. I mean, to me, that's seed saving. This is what we have to teach everybody to recognize. It's easy, but we've just stopped doing it. We think we have to sit up, in January and look through color catalogs and order seeds from thousands of miles away to have a great garden, when all we need to do really is to take the best of what we did the year before in adaptation and bring it into the next year's garden and the next and the next. And that happens when you save your seeds. So what a cool technology that seeds allow us to do that, and that they can adapt and start to change so quickly. And I think this is what we've forgotten as American gardeners, especially since World War II, that, our grandparents and our great-grandparents would have, said, duh, that's why we garden. That seed saving is part and parcel of gardening. I don't know how you would garden without it.
Yeah. Yeah, we've lost it, like a lot of things. Yeah. So what is the difference between hybrid, open-pollinated, and GMO seeds?
That's a really great question, because when you buy seeds or somebody hands seeds to you, unless they have a packet or a label, or you can find out the catalog that they came from, you won't be able to tell just holding the seeds. They don't come with the label, so you could hold a hybrid lettuce seed, open-pollinated lettuce seed. There are no genetically modified ones, but if you held the seeds, they all look the same. And so, gardeners need to learn to find a way to differentiate. And so, open-pollinated is basically the word that's developed, in our cultural circles over the last 20 or 30 years to describe seeds as they've always been. And so, for 10,000 years, humans learned how to save seeds, first from wild plants, right? And we saved the ones that we liked, that worked for us a little bit better. I mean, basically, that's journey has been to things that didn't taste quite as bitter, things that had more starch and sugar in them, because humans like that. I mean, that's what happened to carrots and things like beets. especially. And then we also saved from things that were easier to save the seeds from, and that's what happened in our grains. And so that we could have an easier and better and sweeter, food system. And so those are open-pollinated seeds. And a word corollary to that, we are now looking back and calling all those great varieties that it took so long to develop, and those varieties that were brought to America by all the immigrants. They all brought their best seeds. Those things we look back now and call land races. And that term is another way of describing open-pollinated seeds that have a variety of characteristics in them. They still have a lot of diversity in them, but they were the best of things that we had up to that point. And so that's open-pollinated. Hybrid seeds are a relatively new term, started being used in the 30s and 40s, and they're the result of a specific cross between two inbred parents. And I say inbred because usually what happens is, in order to get a good modern hybrid, somebody somewhere in a breeding system, at a university or technical laboratory these days, a private technical laboratory, in trying to improve a crop, inbreeds something that they found so that they can, what they call seed, or bring out specific characteristics. And they'll do that at one parental line, and then they'll bring out a different set of characteristics through 2 or 3 generations in another parental line, and then they control the cross between those lines. And what this process does, I don't want to get technical on anybody, but what this cross does is allows them to predict what that offspring's going to be like. And so this is the first generation offspring after their planned cross. And so we call those F1 hybrids. An F1 hybrid is the first generation offspring after a planned cross. And F stands for filial, or filial 1. So that's the first generation after the cross. Used to be in catalogs you could see F2, which would be saving seeds from an F1. It would be the filial 2, or the second generation. But generally today, when you see the word hybrid, it means first generation cross after a plant, after particular parents have been worked on. And so not as easy to save seeds from a hybrid as it is from an open pollinated or landrace variety. Why? Because, well, I call it the red-haired problem. We've all understand this when we see a red-haired child in human populations that's born to a parent that has black hair, one of them, and the other parent, say the mother, has blonde hair, and they have a red-haired child. And we all go, oh, my gosh, what went on? Well, we know now that that red-haired characteristic was hidden in the grandparents. And that's what happens when you save seeds from a hybrid. You don't know what kinds of hidden recessive genetics are going to be expressed. And so, I call this Mr. Toad's Wild Ride. I like seeing what's hidden underneath there, and I just have to keep saving seeds from the things I like until I get a variety either like my original F1 hybrid or maybe something different. And so you can save seeds from everything. And that's a myth I think American gardeners have been taught. Is a lot of American gardeners will tell you, oh, you can't save seeds from hybrids. Well, you can. You just have to expect that there may be more variety, especially for home gardeners in, that next generation, and that's okay. Along about 1976 and the rise of the biotech industry, we started hearing rumors about a completely new kind of seed. And these were genetically modified. We now call those GMOs, genetically modified organisms. And they're completely different from anything else we've seen before. And that's where you go in to the DNA and actually take genes from another complete life form sometimes, from fungus or from bacteria or from animals, and you insert that into the DNA of plants and start a whole new kind of organism in a sense. Obviously, they resemble the organisms that we've had in the past, but they are different on a genetic level, and that's what genetically modified are. And there's a lot of questions about obviously, in the media and in the scientific circles about what the long-term effects of this are. But that's basically what a GMO is.
Yeah, what seed groups have GMOs now? It's not everything across the board.
No, there's only about, as we speak right now, there's only about 7 different crops that have been genetically modified. And the ones that home gardeners might have access to are even fewer than that. I mean, corn, obviously, soybeans. There are genetically altered varieties of canola. And actually, zucchini and yellow crookneck squash, those are probably the most likely to get into a home garden. However, remember, the companies that are doing this work are huge. They're some of the largest corporations on the planet. And the development of these genetically modified varieties cost hundreds of millions of dollars and took decades. And they don't sell them to home gardeners. When you buy the seeds to genetically modified crops, it comes with a 32-page contract that you agree to when you open up the package. In this case, they're 50-pound bags. And so they were never meant for the home market. Now, does that mean that some have never gotten into it? I don't know. Does it mean that maybe some of the genetically modified crops haven't cross-pollinated their wind, say from corn, didn't get into an organic or a non-GMO corn crop? That's possible. In fact, the National Organic Program hasn't even set a percentage level for contamination from GMO crops and still allow farmers to call their crops certified organic. So it's kind of a new thing that we're trying to work out now, but that's basically what happens along those lines.
So are the GMO seeds, are they dangerous to us?
Well, we don't know. You know, there's a huge camp of scientists even who say they are. That conclusion, the best papers that I've read around that say so, not because of the specific traits in all cases that have been engineered into the DNA, but because of up until now, the process itself of inserting genes was pretty messy. And it has caused all sorts of what they call collateral damage to the DNA. And this may or may not, there's a lot of circumstantial evidence to point out that this unplanned DNA in foods, which causes changes in proteins and all sorts of things, may be the reason why we're seeing a rise in allergies, which would be our human body's first line of response to new foods or things that our bodies have never seen before. And they've certainly not seen this kind of collateral damage before. So that's one of the dangers. You know, there are questions as to whether engineering a plant's ability to produce a pesticide, which is what happens in in a lot of the corn that's been genetically modified, whether doing that and then making that pesticide available to our bodies, because we're now eating that corn directly. We're allowed to eat genetically modified sweet corn, whether that may have long-term ill health consequences, whether that's dangerous or not. You know, it's really hard to find a 20-year peer-reviewed scientific paper about it. We do know what the public has decided, is that there's millions of people steering away from these sorts of things while the jury's out. And there are, you know, hundreds of thousands, if not millions of mothers who question this because they're seeing sickness and allergies in their children. And so that's the circumstantial evidence, and we'll just have to see. Personally, I think they are dangerous. I think it's dangerous to put the production of so many of the things on the planet in the hands of so few. We've got 3 corporations now that own about 72% of the world's seeds. These are big biotech companies. They're not even agriculture or seed companies anymore. And they're the ones driving the production of these genetically modified plants. And I see nothing that's been put out on the market that actually makes them better for farmers, that really increase yield guard those plants against drought tolerance. I mean, the idea of genetic modification may in the end be a really great idea, but we got collateral damage and we've centralized the production of these things in such few hands for short-term profit, and they're basically chemical companies. And, you know, that idea, in my opinion, up to now has been a bad idea.
Yeah, that sounds bad. And you know what? I don't want my kids to be their guinea pigs.
Right.
So,
that's what mothers are saying.
That was your way. Yeah. So what kind of seeds do you save?
Well, I'm trying to save everything now. I mean, it is such a powerful and wonderful and beautiful technology that once you get started, I mean, it's hard not to. I mean, and the benefits are so diverse. And so what I would suggest to people who have been gardening and maybe gardening really well is start saving seeds first from the really easy ones. I wrote a little book back in 1994 called Basic Seed Saving, and I've been selling it for around $5 ever since, and it's been translated into a dozen languages maybe around the planet because it's so basic and simple. And what I did was really deceptively simple. I just put all the easy things to save from first in the book so that people could get their wings and learn how to do this. And what I learned is that they get caught up totally in it, and then they'll go on and learn the harder things so that they can save everything else like I do. I try to do now. So those 5 easy things are tomatoes, peppers, peas, beans, and lettuce. Every gardener should save those. They're easy because they're largely self-pollinating crops. What that means is that the structure of their flower is set up so that they get pollen from their own flowers before they even open. And what this means is you don't have to worry about your neighbors growing something different. You don't have to worry about genetic mistakes, in large part. I mean, when you get into botany and biology, you never say never. It's always possible. In some areas of the country, there are leaf cutter bees that drill in through the cones in pepper flowers, say, and do cross-pollinate them. Maybe in the Southwest, up to 20% of crossing from these bees, depending on the time of year and where you are. When I lived in Idaho, I never saw any crossing in any of these crops. And I've heard stories all over the country. So, I mean, again, absolute purity isn't even necessary for a home gardener. If you see a mistake in your garden because something cross-pollinated with it, what's the worst thing that can happen to you? You still get to eat it. You're still gardening in almost every case. So there's nothing to lose. In fact, it's gardeners that have always made these mistakes and created the diversity that we've lost. And they can create the diversity back. So get back to that big scale. It's home gardeners that should be saving seeds. Start with these 5 easy ones. Don't worry about mistakes and start getting, convinced that this is the best thing you've ever done along the lines of gardening, because it is. It's really fun.
When you say you're saving seeds, to back up just a little bit, we're not saving GMO seeds. Are we saving hybrid seeds or open pollinated? Where do you fall there?
Well, I love to save both. Open pollinated seeds, you can generally expect to get what the parent was. In other words, if you've got a green bell pepper and you save the seeds from it and plant them all, you'll get all green bell peppers. If you save seeds from a hybrid bell pepper, and I did this, there's a really great hybrid called ACE, F1 hybrid. I grew it in Idaho because it sets fruit even on really cold nights. So regular bell peppers, if it gets down below 40 degrees at night, lots of times don't set fruit, and all mountain gardeners know this. You can grow peppers, have really great plants, even see the flowers, and you never get any peppers. Well, that's what's happening. It's getting cold at night. Well, ACE F1 will set fruit even if it gets cold. Clear down, you have to freeze and kill it, all right? And so I started growing. I love it. I hate the idea of buying the seeds every year. So I saved seeds from my ACE F1, and I planted those out to get the F2, it's called generation. And we actually grew out 200 plants from this F2 generation, and we got everything from little red hot peppers all the way up to a big white football. This thing that literally looked like a football. And all that diversity was hidden in there, right, because of the parents. Who knows what parents they used to cross? Some wild pepper, it still had all this diversity in it. You know, that's where they found this characteristic. So it was so much fun. I'm still saving seeds. We're up to F9 now. And if you want, I've saved enough through the generation so that every time I get a little green bell pepper like the original F1, that was easy. Now I'm working on the hot pepper lines and the big white pepper lines and all the other stuff. And all this came out of this adventure from saving seeds from an F1 hybrid. That's just an example.
I find the deeper I go into gardening, I'm 30 years in now, the more adventure there is. That sounds like a great adventure to do next.
Isn't gardening great for that? You just love how, you know, and every experienced gardener I know that's been gardening for 30 years or more, those gardeners are the most humble, too. They're the ones who always, you ask them, you know, what they know about, and they always go, well, I don't know much. You know, I'm still making mistakes, you know, and I love that attitude. I just love it.
I go for proficiency as opposed to perfection. My question to me is, can I put enough food on the table? If the answer is yes, I'm successful.
Yeah, that's it.
So if you save seeds, where do you keep the seeds?
Well, you know, for all gardeners, you know, throughout the centuries, most of them were just put into clay pots. I mean, we found seeds in the, you know, some date palm seeds were found in a pyramid in Egypt. They're 2,000 years old. They were in Israel, actually, in an archaeological dig, in a clay pot, and carbon dated, and they germinated. Right? They actually, the embryo was still alive. They had to pull the embryo out, put it in a petri dish. But, you know, so clay pots work pretty well. I mean, the general rule of thumb is keep your seeds cool, dark, and dry. Okay? So what does cool mean? Do not get them above 80 degrees Fahrenheit. When Dr. Bruce Bugbee at the Utah State University did testing for NASA on the seeds that we're going to take to Mars, because if we do a trip to Mars, we're going to have to grow food when we get there. It just takes too long to get back. They wanted to know the storage parameters, and what he found is that if you allow your seeds to get above 80, they start dying off pretty quick. By pretty quick, you may still have some seeds that last for 10 years, but the majority start to die more quickly. And so how long do they live? You know, we routinely got 90% germination on tomato seeds that we'd grown that were 10 years old or more. So seeds will last a long, 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 long time. You know, more so than you've ever been told in your life. Never give up on your seeds, even if you cook them in the car. If that happened to my wife, Belle, who's the co-director at the Rocky Mountain Seed Alliance with me, even cooked them. Some of them still worked. We had some teosinte seeds. And so and remember this, even if only one seed works, say 99% of them die. Because you've kept them too long, you got them hot, you got them wet, whatever. Even if only one of them works, it works. That genetic gift from 10,000 years ago is yours. And those unique characteristics live on. So don't throw away your seeds. Never give up on them. Keep them cool, dark, and dry.
Nice. I keep seeds from year to year and grow some out on my own, and then put them in storage, and then 5 or 6 years later, I'll get that batch out and grow another batch and save some of those. So it's a lot of fun.
Good for you.